The game requires at least 2 players, and there's a max of 4. Components are the region board, 140 soldier pieces, tank pieces, and about 2 die. The setup, each player will select the color, and depending on the players, count out the armies. 2 players, each player gets 50 armies. 3, each one gets 35. 4, each gets 40. To begin, we start off by laying the board flat on a table or a flat surface, and each player is going to roll 1 die. Whoever rolls the highest number takes one of their combat pieces, and places it onto any region they want on the board. Starting to the left, the first player, each one from there places 1 combat into an unoccupied region until all regions are claimed or all pieces are gone. After all territories are claimed, each player can start placing their armies into the region that they are. You continue with that until everyone runs out of. There is no limit to the number of combat units you can place on a single region, so you can pile up everything on one if you want. Whoever rolled the highest die in the beginning of the game will now begin the game and start the gameplay. So each player to start draws a resource, a diplomacy card on the board. Certain regions are only accessible from other regions on the map. For example, the dotted lines that are connecting from one region to another are only accessible from those regions that connect. So that way it can control the invasion of certain territories, so everyone can't just swarm on one. As you see in the example, there are plenty, I have the board up, there are plenty of red lines to see only some territories, and I've even given an example. So to attack, this is the basis of the game. A player must have a combat unit adjacent to the one person they want to attack. So you can't attack in here, Brazil, someone in Australia. So you must have someone next to the combat unit. So when you decide you want to attack someone, you get 1 dice roll for both of them. The objective is to get the highest roll. So if you are defending your region, you get 1 extra roll on top of your roll. So you roll once, you get that. If that's not the highest, you can keep going. If the defending player is defending a village, they get an additional roll. So if they roll once that they already get, oh, it's not high enough, they can roll again. The defending player is defending a city, they get 2 additional rolls on top of their 1. And if they're defending a capital, they get 3 additional dice rolls on top of their 1. If the defending player rolls the higher die, their village, city, or capital is safe. And if they lose, obviously, the attacking player gets their region and they lose their armies or combat that is placed on there. The winner is the first person to control 45 map regions, or the player who has the most owned regions after our gameplay, whichever comes first.
Alright, so this is the map for our game. As you can see, the map is split up into separate color-coded regions, with each corresponding to a geographic area. Like, there's Brazil, there's Peru, there's Bolivia, Argentina, Colombia, and a bunch of others. As you can see, they all have little dots on them. Those are meant to represent major cities, but the regions themselves, the 3-letter tags you see, are what the region itself is called. Like, I made the region where Moscow roughly is Moss, and then Scandinavia is Ska. They're 3-letter tags so that they could fit in the regions and still be seen. Because as you can see, some of the regions, are a bit smaller than others and thus a bit hard to fit text in. Also, some of the islands are a lot bigger than their real-life counterparts. This is just for visibility purposes. Like over here, there are not islands that big. And then there's also the red lines. As you can see, the red dotted lines sort of show like where you can move between and what places you can invade. Like, for instance, you could only get to the Nam region from, a land border somewhere. You cannot get to it through that random little island. And at the same time, probably the most strategic one would probably be like New England, to where you can only get there, where you can get to the Caribbean through there because of that connection to Bermuda. And then probably the biggest of them all is the one from Alaska to this region in Russia called Kra. But yeah, that's pretty much the map, and that's everything that's on it.
So here are our game pieces. These are the capital pieces, and we have different colors for different players. Each player only gets one unless you can take control of another player's. So it's important for each player to put their capital in a safe place. This is an example of one of our city pieces. There will be 12, and they will be placed around the board. These serve as choke points for players to fight over. And this is because capitals in cities boost the number of units the player controlling them gets at the start of their turn. And also controlling whole continents will also give the player access to additional units. So then we have these larger pieces, and they will represent the tanks. And then we have smaller pieces that will represent soldiers. And we have a lot more in these, but this is just an example. And then we also have our dice. The red ones are for the attackers, and the darker ones are for the defenders. So the amount of dice the defender gets will be determined by what type of territory they are defending. If they're defending a normal territory, they'll get 1, a city 2, and a capital 3. And then the attacker will use dice based on the number of units they are attacking with.
Hello, this is Jeremy. I'm going to talk to you today about the cards we have designed, and we have 11 of them so far. We'd like to get some more in, and these are really rough prototypes. I hand drew the images. I'm not an artist, but here's what I have so far. I'll talk about the first two right here, which is the city and the village. And in the rule book, it says that players can build cities and villages, and they're given a capital. So I didn't build a card for that, but this will allow you to build cities and villages anywhere that you have a space available. And then moving over, we have peace and war. So the ability to wage war against another player, or dissolve a war that has been against you by another player. So you can use peace to dissolve that if you think you're going to lose, if you have the card in your hand. And then we also have resource and diplomacy cards. So diplomacy cards would be things like war, and then the different, and then peace. Those are the diplomacy cards we have right now. And then lastly, we have tanks and soldiers. And tanks and soldiers are used as combat units. So if you draw one of these, you're then allowed to take either a soldier or a tank and place it anywhere you have the ability to on the board. So all these things together allow you to try to win the game. So that's what we have so far, and